Crystal, what are you taking a look at?
Well, guys, there are three seemingly unrelated stories out right now fueling desperation, erasing life savings, pushing you out of middle-class stability that I think actually fit together perfectly to illustrate the rot at the core of our society. The immorality, venality, and I'm going to get mine individualism, which has eclipsed every other value that you might organize a society around. These stories are not just warning signs, but for those impacted are dire and destructive forces spreading misery from coast to coast. Now, the first is one that's burst into the news just recently, the extreme shortage of baby formula. Now, there's a number of compounding reasons why new moms are facing such a frightening inability to obtain at any price the formula on which their infants' lives depend. But as we've dug into the root causes, the story is familiar and it's predictable. Monopoly consolidation, revolving door government corruption, in this instance from the FDA, and good old-fashioned corporate greed. Our friend Brianna Joy Gray laid out this part quite well over at our old stomping grounds.
Back in October of 2021, an employee at Abbott Nutrition production facility, known as the Sturgis plant, sent a whistleblower letter to the FDA. It alleged, among other things, that management had failed to fix failing, worn-out machines that had become breeding grounds for a Coronobacter bacteria outbreak that had led to 4 baby hospitalizations and 2 babies dead. Food and Safety News reported that, quote, for several years, some of the equipment associated with the drying process at the Sturgis site was in need of repair. As a result, a number of product flow pipes were pitting and leaving pinholes. This allowed bacteria to enter the system and, at times, led to bacteria not being adequately cleaned out. This, in turn, caused product flowing through the pipes to pick up the bacteria that was trapped in the defective pipe, and it ended up in babies' food. Why did Abbott Nutrition let its machinery get so compromised? Well, it's probably not the case that they didn't have the money to update their facilities. A couple of months after the whistleblower report, Abbott Laboratories authorized $5 billion in stock buybacks, a practice by which companies' profit is used not to improve the business or to pay workers, but to enrich shareholders. Now, I bring this up because I know some listeners might take the position that markets are generally efficient, that businesses make good decisions about what to do with their profits out of a sense of self-preservation. They must invest in their internal infrastructure, right? They'll pay their workers well to attract and retain good talent. They'll only distribute profit once the bases have been covered. After all, why would a company behave in a way that ultimately hurt it in the long run?
Now, one of the core promises of our economic system was that the free market would ensure that we do not have food shortages, that we wouldn't face the bare shelves and long lines for basic goods that were common in places like the Soviet Union. And yet here we are, unable to provide the most critical sustenance for our most vulnerable population. It is hard to overstate what a core failure this is. And that failure is not in spite of our economic system, but directly because of it. As we have gone further and further down the road of unregulated capitalism, we have allowed the seeds of destruction of that system to be planted. The whole idea of the system is that it would reward the best and the brightest, those with the best products, the best price, the best productivity. But rigging markets, it turns out, is a lot easier and a lot more profitable than actual free market competition. And as our society became less and less equal, it meant that the profiteers at the top could more easily buy and capture government, leading to unchecked monopoly consolidation, anti-competitive guaranteed government contracts, and every incentive to simply give money away to the already wealthy executives and shareholders rather than invest it in workers, innovation, or even the basics of maintaining their production facilities at a sufficient standard. When competition is little and the regulators are in your pocket, you don't have to worry about producing a quality product. You only have to worry about financial engineering to your own benefit. Life and health of babies be damned. The greatest rewards in our system were supposed to flow to the greatest innovators. Instead, they flow to the greatest sociopaths and the most determined cheaters. The perfect cherry on top of this particular dystopian hellscape story is a Barron's analysis that while baby formula shortages are bad for parents and presumably for babies, it might actually juice the stock of the very company whose crimes helped to precipitate this crisis. If that isn't late-stage capitalism, I don't know what is. But as horrifying as this story is, baby formula is really just the tip of the iceberg of our tale of decline. Our next parable showcases an all-out assault on another essential of human life, shelter. In Brevard County, 2 Goldman Sachs-backed investment funds just teamed up to buy an entire neighborhood for $45 million. That move has alarmed a coalition of local faith-based organizations who have been fighting for affordable housing for their community. The leader of one of those groups told reporters that, quote, investors come in and of course invest, property just goes off the roof, which marginalizes a whole lot of people who just can't afford it. This is, of course, part of a larger trend we've covered here of permanent capital buying up single-family homes, pushing young buyers out of the market, looking to turn all of America into a land of renters, and driving up housing costs for everyone in the meantime. Now, if you're already an asset owner, a homeowner, this is all well and good, but everyone else is getting screwed. Yesteryear's first-time home buyer is being pushed into rentals where they cannot build wealth. Renters with middle-class incomes are getting squeezed harder and harder, making it impossible to save up enough to ever enter the homeowner class. Low-income renters and seniors on fixed incomes, they're getting pushed out of the market altogether and sometimes onto the street. In fact, there is not a single state in the nation where minimum wage workers can afford a two-bedroom apartment, and about half of Americans cannot afford even a one-bedroom apartment. Financialization of everything means permanent capital is free to buy up the nation's increasingly scarce housing stock and become America's landlord, closing off one of the few remaining pathways to a stable middle-class life. As I've argued before, perhaps the most salient class divide now in the country is between homeowners and non-homeowners. Goldman Sachs and their Wall Street buddies, enabled by corrupt politicians, are locking more and more of Americans into a precarious renter underclass, pushing the white picket fence American dream permanently out of reach or bastardizing it. Now the American dream isn't yours to own, it's only available to rent at a high price from the money changers on Wall Street. But for true late-stage capitalism, you gotta look at the rise and fall of crypto. Now, crypto hypers played on exactly the loss of meaning and community that had been created by the soulless, rapacious system. The original promise of crypto was that our system was hopelessly beyond reform, so perhaps it could be supplanted by an alternative order operating outside of the reach of a corrupt government. That original promise then collapsed into little more than a Ponzi scheme cash grab. Crypto as a way to join the speculator class. After all, if you can't beat them, join them. And why shouldn't you? It's not like the financial engineers on Wall Street were creating anything real. It's not like the stock market was some actual reflection of intrinsic value. Maybe, just maybe, you could get in on the ground floor of the next big thing and be one of the people for whom the system is rigged, rather than one of the people who is constantly getting the short end of the stick. This is exactly the system that crypto billionaires like Sam Bankman-Fried are trying to shore up, jumping into the Washington game in true Wall Street ghoul fashion, schmoozing regulators, buying up politicians, flooding money into congressional races to make sure his particular grift gets the official stamp of approval. Now, for a while, it actually seemed like it just might work. But as of now, the crypto dream has officially turned to nightmare. Crypto losses are now equivalent to the housing collapse of 2008, except without the benefit of a single real asset backstopping them. The fallout has been completely devastating. Investors who lost everything as one particular stablecoin called Terra lost its peg and then completely collapsed. They flooded a Reddit forum with messages so desperate that forum moderators pinned suicide hotline numbers at the top. Now, the entire forum has been shut down, presumably because most of the commentary was revolving around suicide. In the end, crypto turned out to be just a new and novel way for regular people to be manipulated, exploited, and ultimately completely crushed. It's too early to say whether the contagion is going to spread to the real economy as well. So food, housing, meaning, opportunity, all are under assault by a system so corroded that it's turned completely upside down. The villains and scofflaws win, the honest and law-abiding get screwed, the basic promises of our system, low prices, reliable supply, predictable path to basic stability, turn out to be as empty as a UST wallet. And Sagar, you know, it kind of fits with what you were saying about how cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.